When lust for power combines with ungovernable hatred for the elected president, you have what we're seeing in the U.S. House of Representatives. To my knowledge, there has never been such a display of viciousness and lawlessness in our politics. It's a shameful and shameless betrayal of the American people. Mainstream Democrats, in particular, who have a right to expect that their elected representatives will use their legislative authority to do something other than overturn an election and bring down a sitting president, should be outraged. The Democrats have been driven to desperation by a president who came into office on a promise to root out corruption and abuse of power in Washington. That is, he took aim at all the cushy arrangements, the fat salaries and benefits, and the entrenched privileges of the ruling class. Not only is he working to fulfill that promise and others, something no politician ever does, it's unseemly, he's proving impossible for the bureaucracy to outfox. Mr. Trump reminds me of Muhammad Ali in his prime, dancing around his opponents in the ring, wearing them down, taunting them into making mistakes, then sucker punching them. The Dems have ruptured themselves, trying to brutalize him into submission. They can't land a glove on him, much less a knockout punch. How annoying. I sympathize as a former Democrat with middle-class whites who remain loyal to the party and its past principles. You've been a political footnote since the Obama administration. Now you're not even in the appendix at the back of the book. For myself, I don't want to belong to a party that considers me injurious to its overriding goal, which is power for its elites based on pandering to an assortment of victim groups whom they encourage to consider me as their enemy. For confirmation, if you need it, visit Elizabeth Warren's webpage. Should she win in 2020, we'll have elected our first angry, domineering, openly socialist president. But let's move on to impeachment. Version 10.6, or whatever, I can't keep track of the updates. The Dems started developing the program as soon as Mr. Trump won in 2016, before the man had even taken the oath of office and been given a fair chance to commit an impeachable offense. 3 years later, they're still at it. In this latest version, Mr. Trump telephoned a fellow head of state, President Zelensky of Ukraine, and among other topics, asked him to look into allegations of corruption that damaged the reputation of the U.S. government. Those are the bare facts. Mrs. Pelosi and her goon squad immediately swung into action to declare the call impeachable because it touched on former VP Joseph Biden. Therefore, Mr. Trump was using the office of the presidency to harm a potential opposition candidate. Get it? Pelosi and her goons consider that criminal. Perception being reality, with the gutter media spreading the word, all they needed to do was state that the phone call was impeachable to establish it as a factoid. Notice, however, that the indignant Mrs. Pelosi isn't calling for an immediate vote on articles of impeachment. She's merely launching an inquiry to keep impeachment in the headlines. Since no impeachable offense was committed, her obvious aim is to sully the president. That's an offense that, in my opinion, would justify impeachment and conviction of Mrs. Pelosi, but we'll leave that for another video. But why all the fuss? The election will be held in just 13 months, and the Democrats assure us that either Joe Biden or Elizabeth Warren will trounce the Trumpster. Then his odious presence, the robust economy, the levels of employment not seen in 5 decades will be behind us, and we can transition comfortably into socialist bliss, complete with a recession, anemic growth, and high unemployment, lovingly managed by a true blue Democratic administration. Except that the Democrats have neither a winning candidate nor a winning platform. Their last-ditch hope is to destroy Trump politically and, if possible, personally. As the campaign season heats up, their desperation has heated up with it. They need to be stopped in their tracks, or a return to decency and the rule of law in our country will be made even more difficult. In English common law, upon which our legal system is based, there's a principle derived from ancient Roman law that states, quote, no penalty without a law, unquote, or no law, no crime. A person cannot be punished for what the law does not prohibit. Communication by a U.S. president with other heads of state is not a crime, but part of the duties of the office. So much for pointing out the obvious. Now, let's look at a disquieting historical instance of how what the Dems are trying to pull off can miscarry. During the reign of Charles I of England in the 17th century, Thomas Wentworth, Earl of Strafford, was impeached by the House of Commons. His offense was supporting the monarchy, against which the Parliament had pitted itself. Wentworth, whose many enemies wanted him out of the way, was tried in the House of Lords. He was acquitted. He had committed no crime, and he proved it. The Commons, roughly equivalent to our House of Representatives, then did something that Mrs. Pelosi and her accomplices must sorely wish they could do. They voted a bill of attainder against Wentworth, legislating his guilt and sentencing him to death despite his acquittal. On May 12, 1641, he was beheaded on Tower Hill. Ah, what a happy day it would be for Mrs. Pelosi if she could contrive a similar event on the National Mall. Unfortunately, though, legislating guilt is not yet possible in our country. Sorry, Nance. Political sentiment at the time of Wentworth's execution was that all should be well if his head were off. Instead, a civil war followed that ushered in Oliver Cromwell as dictator. His memory lives on as one of history's great tyrants, especially among the Irish, whom he massacred in cold blood by the thousands. In the end, King Charles himself was beheaded. It was not a happy time. The lesson we learn from it, yet again, is be careful what you wish for. You may get it. Our Democrats think that impeaching and convicting Donald Trump, even if it were possible, would make everything peachy and pave the way for them to retake the presidency and expand their power. Considering the candidates and the platform they're offering us, that's not such a hot idea. A better one would be for the party to dedicate a few more election cycles to reconnecting with their constituents, instead of serving just the Democratic ruling class and its favored victim groups. Maybe then we could vote Democrat in good conscience and with a reasonable expectation of something good coming from it. Thanks for watching. Be sure to click like and subscribe to support the channel, and let me hear from you in the comment section below with your thoughts and ideas. We'll see you back here next time.